welcome back. This is part 3 in my geometry nodes for power cables or other kinds of cables. We're just going to quickly go over what exactly we've done before. In the previous video, we needed a way to control how the ends of the cable behave. So we don't want the ends to be dislocated from the actual spline ends, just because it makes it easier to attach plugs or different things to your actual cables. So we used a fade right here to change the effect to fall off at the ends, and we can of course control that with our fall off sharpness and fall off clipping. You can see the effect in the actual viewer node here. Right now it's set to look at one of the fade effects. Change that to the clipped version. And we can actually see we can change the clipping for the effect. It's quite effective. We also added twists for the ends so that we can control how the end is twisted, so that you can fit it into sockets or anything else. So it rotates rather. It hasn't been plugged in yet. So I think that would be one of the first things we do, is plug it in. Yeah, that'll be one of the first things you do, is plug it in. So we're going to plug these in to the actual group node here. The group node output is what shows us stuff that we can change in the modifier here, the geometry nodes modifier. So this is a new thing I just added. I just plugged it in and connected the two little dots here, the multiply to this particular value, and I'll select the second one and do the same for the bottom here. And we're going to call them beginning and end. Go right down to the bottom. Start, twist, and the second one we'll call end twist. End twist. Yeah, so we're just going to check what we did, make sure it works. And this will change based off of the fades and the clipping. It's the way we have it set up. So we're going to change the clipping down a little bit. And probably the fades as well. Yeah, so now we have a bit of a twist for our end. We go through and set up a separate fade for the ends if you wanted to, but I mean, for right now, this is more than adequate. So now if we change the amplitude to something not so dramatic, something more like this, you notice that the chord it's all right, but what I'd like to do is add a little bit of extra like twists across the chord itself. And what we're gonna do that now. Just like random little twists along its length. So come down here. Okay, so we're going to add in a noise texture, and we're going to add in we'll get it working first. So it gets plugged into curve tilt, and we're going to add it run through this addition here. I want it to fade first and then run through the addition. So pull it down here. We'll just hide this viewer node. So we're going to use the fade again through a multiply node. So we'll just duplicate this because it's a math node, like this, and then we'll plug in the minimum, multiply, and the factor. This time, since it is two-dimensional, you don't need to split the channels. You just need the one factor for a twist value. And then we'll just remove that and that. I'll take the geometry node back here, plug this in, see what we're getting. And let's see. So this factor is, okay, let's plug this into an add node as well and just push it into the twist amount. I mean, it should work in theory. Yeah, you can see it sort of rippling a little bit. It's going to be offset only 1 degree though, so we need to actually change that. So we're going to add in another multiply right here. I have to clean these nodes up later, they look terrible. And we'll multiply it by a factor of 10. So now we're seeing some interesting stuff going on here. And we also notice that the fades at the end are still intact. It's not affecting the end at all. We're just gonna make sure that twists are intact as well. Yeah, those seem to be working. Now, there is something going on here with this noise. Again, it's from 1 to 0, so it's always going to be in a positive direction. I would like that to be remapped. So of course, map range. And drop it in front of the multiply. And we're going to map between 0.5 and minus 0.5. We should get a bit of a more random effect now. Yeah, we got some really cool randomness going on there. Okay, so obviously you need to have control of the prevalence of this particular effect. So you need to have the ability to change its impact or drama. So we're going to change we're going to pull in another node from our geometry nodes, so many. And we're just going to plug that one into multiply. So now, we take this value. No, that's the wrong multiply. Because it's going to multiply everything, including the fade. That's interesting. It should, since the fade is 0, shouldn't give us too much trouble. Let's see. It shouldn't affect the ends. The ends are what I'm concerned about. And it does seem to be twisting the ends. So it's affecting the ends, which means that it is multiplying a value that shouldn't be there. So just set this up to the viewer instead. Take a look at the viewer, troubleshooting a little bit. I could cut this out of the video, but it's important to know how to troubleshoot your node setups as well. So if I change the value here, this changes. And why does it change? So it's coming out of here. 0.5. Oh, I remapped it. Yeah, the order here is not correct. So this one should be that. This one's remapping it, the value, and then this one's a gate. And if I add a multiply after that, gate to improve the effect, that should give me the desired result. There we go. So now I can change the amount without changing the ends. Like that. And we'll call it something before I forget what it is. That would be random twist. Twist. Dude. Random twist amplitude. And the second value is just going to go into the noise effect like before. Scale. So we're going to call this one twist scale. Yeah. So now we should have a little bit more realism in the chord. Scale the noise. You could animate this too. You could add in the noise texture here has another setting. You set it to 4D, and then you can actually just change this just changes like a seed value for the noise. We've got an extra node there, don't we? Here we go. Move this one. Scale. So let's set it a little higher, not too high. And the twist value, of course. Set a little bit. So you have a chord now with, this is obviously a very kinked chord, but you have a chord with a few little random twists and knurls and different little things that you see in a regular chord. So now one thing about this is that it's not, there's no material on this. So if we try to add material, it is an output from geometry nodes. If we try to add material, we run into a bit of an issue. The regular way. So let's say I wanted to go to the material panel here. Material, new material, we'll call this power chord. And I'm going to change it to something so I know exactly what I'm looking at. And let's set this to rendered. We're going to add a light to the scene because it doesn't have any lights. Light. Point. Like so, just add a couple more lights. Something like that. All right. Doesn't seem to be doing anything. You have to add the material in the geometry nodes. So it would be after it's set to a curve, curve tilt, curve to mesh, and then we're going to add it after here. So it's set material. And you could either select it from here, which changes it. This is in the rendered view, by the way, in cycles. Or we can pull in another node from our daddy of all nodes. And then when we go to the modifier stack here, we can select power chord, and that gives us our material. So the problem with this now is there's a few problems. One, if you were to animate it, it will, like if you wanted to animate the chord doing something, you could move it around. But if you look at the ends, they twist because of the way that the spline is interpreted or interpolated by Blender. It's going to have a twist You could sort of eliminate that by subdividing the curve a little bit and then giving it a bit more, like a bit more curve detail right at the ends. And then if you move it around again, hopefully that shows up in the video. If you move it around again, it doesn't twist as much. So just show wireframe. You know, it sort of wiggles a bit. The start doesn't twist very much either. So there are ways around it. Another way of doing it is to model the chord straight, or a fairly straight version of it. So we'll just do that quickly. And this is only for animating your chord. Now let's say I had a, a reasonably straight chord like this. And it's not very straight. Obviously, there's a huge kink in the chord, but now I'm just going to save this out. If I go over to chord curve, I'm going to duplicate that, Shift D. I'm going to hide the original. Then I'm going to take this, the Y. I'm going to add snap origin to geometry. I'm going to add in another curve, and I'm going to scale it to 2 meters. Going to apply that, transform, apply, scale. I'm going to go into it because, as you remember, the vertices or handles are not scaled automatically in radius here. So we'll just set that to 1 and 1 respectively. And then I'm just going to sort of make it about the size of the curve-ish. Move it up a bit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this curve mesh, which is now a mesh. You can't do anything else with it. Well, it's not procedural anymore. No, it's not a mesh yet. So it's not a mesh yet. So we're going to try something here. We're going to add something after Modifier Stack. And we're going to select Bezier curve. I'm going to move this a little bit. And then animate it this way. Subdivide. See if this works without, it does work pretty well. And you still have your geometry nodes set up with the curve. Now, this works quite well for animating the curve. If you wanted to animate a plug attached to it, you could like automatically glue the plug to the end. You could, let's say, for example, we'll take this cube and do the same thing. So add a curve deform modifier and then select the Bezier curve that you're trying to modify. Now there is an issue because it'll deform the cube as well. So you kind of have to have, a, show how this works. Yeah, you have to have a little bit of the, at the end here that's just static, so it doesn't deform the cube too much. So there are ways around it, I suppose, like fiddly ways. Subdivide, we'll just try to make it a little straighter, like this. And you can add a handle to affect just these two so that you can automatically do them. But you can see how it's deforming the cube a little bit. But if I was to take these two things like this and animate it or move it, I now have, as long as I don't go too far like inside here, so the bend has to be about where the cube is. And it won't stretch. The nice thing about this is the curve, the actual chord will stay the length that it was before. So it's not like you're stretching the chord. You can do this with bendy bones as well. But one of the problems is, of course, and in my actual demo render, I have like text and words along the chord. So we have to look at putting a material on this chord now. So we do have a material. Let's go down to the shader editor. And let's add in some noise for effect. Noise texture. We'll plug that into the base color. And we're going to add in a color ramp. And we're going to press, I think it's Control T, yeah, Control T. Generated coordinates will be fine for now. Yeah, so we can see some noise in there. I'll make it a little harsher so we can see it better. So that's great. I mean, it's sort of a way of texturing your chord, but if you want like text on this chord, you need to unwrap it. And there's no way currently to do that in Blender 3.1 procedurally. You actually need to use Blender 3.3 has a procedural geometry nodes UV unwrap in it. That could be covered in a different tutorial, but for now, it's simpler to convert this to a mesh. So if you have your chord in the way you like it, let's just quickly, I will quickly model that. We'll remove the chord deform. We'll just hide this. And I'm just going to do a top-down look, tab into edit mode, top-down look again. And we're going to move this around. G. And then just do what I want it to do, mostly. All right. Okay, I'm going to change the handle type to aligned. Automatic, probably. Set curve, toggle, switch direction, handle type, automatic. Yeah, so extrude. Yeah, so now the curve will have automatic handle. It should go right to where the curve, yeah. So I'm just gonna like pull this curve around a little bit so it looks like a power chord. Something like this. And we're gonna go to the side and let's add in a plane. Plane. Tab into that just for a bit of reference. Gives us a bit of shadow. We can see it looks a bit more interesting, more realistic, even if it's not going to be rendered in the texture we want right away. So we're just gonna fiddle with this until it looks correct. I am going to turn down the distortion on this because it's going to make it easier to actually move it around. Zero, and twist is fine. Let's see, amplitude offsets it from the its original axes. So we'll just change the amplitude a little bit. Okay, and the wireframe's not helpful. Yeah, solid's fine. I'm going to change shadow on. I don't think it'll do anything, but oh, a little bit. And just move this stuff around a little bit until the chord looks like it's resting on the ground. I'm going to have to change the, I don't have to, I suppose. You could change it in here, like these minor bits where the chord is sort of resting on itself, and it's more of a pinched effect. You can always edit that in the regular geometry afterwards, but we're just going to settle the position of the chord a little bit better right now. I want more geometry here. Yeah, double subdivide. So that big curve up there, I'll have to fix that in the actual. I mean, it's not like power chords can't do that. Depends on how soft you want your power chord to look. And now I'm going to change all these handles back to aligned, because I have a bit more control then. Subdivide. And that's why I like having a plane, because you can actually just keep checking underneath the plane to see if you are clipping through the surface underneath. So I can do something like this and something like this to see if I'm clipping through the surface. A little bit's fine. I mean, you'd never notice it, just because a little bit of clipping is almost impossible to tell the difference between a tiny bit of clipping, at least in a still render, and regular material squish. So like you're going to have a little bit of material squish where it like intersects a different kind of material, and it would look a little bit like clipping, to be honest. Like right there, that's obviously not quite what we want, but we'll fix that later, just because it's too difficult to do in the curve editor at the moment. Yeah, so just keep changing a few things. That kind of looks correct there. And this is not quite right. And we're not going to spend too much time on it, but could spend a lot of time making it look just right. And I think we're about out of time for today. I will see you in the next video, where we're going to cover UV unwrapping and some final polishing touches for this particular chord. There's a few things I wanted to add to the geometry nodes setup, but I think I've kind of run out of time for today. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully it was helpful. We will work on this again in a little while. This will be almost the conclusion of this particular series, and until I see you then, I'll keep practicing, and happy blendering.